Hi there! Today I'm going to show you how to resize your UI properly in Unity. I have here a quick demo scene. Right now the buttons don't do anything, but we can open the settings menu here. I'd like you to just imagine this as your UI for your own game project. I made this with the Kenny asset bundle here. You can find a link in the description below. So people will have different resolution monitors. Mine is 1080p for the record. Now we don't really care that much about resolution as we do about aspect ratio. My 1080p screen has a 16:9 aspect ratio, meaning you can divide it evenly into that many squares. A 720p monitor will also have the same aspect ratio, so in theory our screens should be the same. You can see here that while in the 1080p mode, the screen looks fine, but when we switch it, however, to 720p, for example, you can see it gets very wrong. By the way, you can switch your resolution by going here and picking one of either the presets, or you can make your own with either a fixed resolution or an aspect ratio. Now you can play around with the scale factor to make sure it fits properly. If we go, for example, to 2/3, which is what you would have to multiply the 1080p screen by, you can see now we have what a 720p screen should look like. Now there's an easier and more automatic way to do this. Just hit scale with screen size here in the canvas scaler. Make sure to also put your reference resolution here, and then it should work. Now, no matter if we're in 720p or 1080p or even in 4K, as long as we have the same aspect ratio, it'll look exactly the same. Anyway, we have a new problem now. If we change our screen size a bit, you can see that our settings menu here looks all weird. Also in the top left, the options button isn't staying in the right position. It's always skewing upwards. If we go to the options button in the hierarchy, you can see that the rectTransform component looks like this. There are a bunch of different settings. I'll get into what the blue ones mean later, but let's focus on these red ones now. Because I used all the default options, most of these objects here are in the middle. What this is an anchor, and it means that if the middle of the screen changes, this button will be at exactly that offset all the time, which is why our buttons sometimes got clipped. What we really want is for this button to always be in the top left. So we'll just hit this top left part here. And now you can see that our options button always stays in the top left. We can do a similar thing with our exit button here in the settings menu. We'd obviously like this to always stay in the top right corner. So instead of putting the anchor in the center, we're going to put it in the top right. Okay, now the options and close button are in the right position, but the rest of the stuff isn't working well. You can see that the settings panel is changing its size like the background, which we don't really want in this scenario. The settings that our panel was on was this stretch, which explains why the size was changing constantly. Let's switch that over to the middle and then see how that looks. There, that's much better. Now if we go to the background panel, you can see why this is the case. When we have one of these stretch components, it always tries to be the same size as the parent above it. In the case of this, it's trying to be the size of the canvas itself. You can see if we stretch it all the way by pressing Alt and by setting the left, top, right, and bottom to 0, you can see that it is now the exact same size as the canvas, and this will also change if we change our screen size. I'd like you to think of these numbers like margins, like in a Word document. You can give the top a bit of space, as well as the bottom, the right, and the left. Now there's a bit of space. Neat. Now let's take a look at this options button. The child beneath it is the exact same size as the parent, because the stretch values here are all 0. Let's try changing the size of it so it more closely fits what we're going for. There, now the text is inside the box, nice and neat. While we're on the topic of making things fit in properly, we'd also like the slider here to fit in properly in the settings menu. Now we obviously don't want it to fill in completely, otherwise that would look wrong. We just want to scale it on one axis. We'd like our slider to stretch horizontally, so we're going to pick one of these. And the choice is yours whether you want it to be anchored in the middle, top, or bottom of the parent object. In our case, we want it to be anchored in the middle. So we're going to pick this one here. Now you can see if we change the size of the parent object, the slider will change with it, but the one we didn't change won't. Let me change this for the other slider as well. Great, now our settings panel looks very nice when we stretch it. However, when we stretch it vertically, you can see that the title sometimes gets in the way, as well as the lower button when we make it too small. We can of course change this by just switching the anchors to the top for the text or the bottom for the button. Okay, let's try that out. And now you can see that it changes very nicely. Great. Okay, the settings look nice, but now let's take another look at these 4 buttons. You can see that when we change the screen size, they don't change with it. Ideally, we'd like these buttons to be evenly split across the height of the whole canvas. Luckily, we can do that with layout groups. If I go back into the hierarchy and make a parent object for all of the buttons, we can call it spacer. All you have to do is give it the vertical layout group. Of course, the same goes for horizontal if you're trying to do it horizontally. Let's make the spacer the width of the screen first by pressing Alt and clicking on the stretch. And now you can see it evenly spaces. However, it's in the top left. We can change this, of course, by changing the alignment from the top left to the middle center. Now you can see it's nicely spaced. Ideally, we'd also like to give it a bit of more space on the top and bottom. We can luckily do that with the padding here. If we wanted our buttons to stretch across the entire screen, or at least a significant portion, we can also enable the control child size on the width. Now you can see it stretches across. We can of course give it some more padding on the left and right so that it more appropriately fits the size of what we're going for. You could theoretically of course do this with the height as well if you're interested in trying that out, but I'm not going to. Now mind you, this is also a dynamic way to space buttons, so if the spacer ever changes its size, or say we add another button, let's duplicate one, you can see that it perfectly spaces them, regardless of how many we add. Okay, our menu is looking great now. It changes dynamically and everything. You may have noticed though, if you have a keen eye, that the background canvas looks a little weird. The lines on the bottom are not as wide as the lines on the side. I can emphasize this fact a bit more if I stretch it. You can see that it gets very extreme here. The line is very wide here and we don't want that obviously. What we can do is go to the source image, just click on the image component and you'll automatically be brought there, and go to the import settings. If you click on the sprite editor, you can see the blue lines represent our sprite, but there's also these green ones. Now these green lines are the answer to our problem. What we can do is extend them. And now our sprite is split into a middle part, which will repeat endlessly, the corners and the edges. Let's hit apply and close the window. If we go back to our image, you can see nothing has changed. However, all we have to do is change our image type to either sliced or tiled, and now you can see it works. We may have to mess around with the pixel per unit parameter here to get it just right, but as you can see now, the lines are evenly spaced, no matter how large we make this canvas. Okay, that was today's video. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something along the way. If you did, please hit that subscribe button. It's free and it helps me a lot. Thanks for watching, you guys. I'll see you next time.